My name is Ariel Agenbroad, and I am an extension educator with the University of Idaho here in Ada County. The first thing I like to do is encourage people to start with a garden plan. So think about, as a family, what do you like to eat? How much time will you have to spend on cooking or preparing produce that you grow? How much time will you have to spend in the garden? And do you think you'll be freezing, drying, or canning any of the produce that you grow? How much space do you have in your garden, and how much money can you devote to your gardening efforts? So if you have a very small space, you might focus on the higher value produce crops, things like sweet peppers, fresh basil, cherry tomatoes, things that you might find more expensive in the store but that are very easy to grow. And you might end up buying your sweet corn from a local farmer rather than trying to grow it in a very small garden. So in the age of the internet, there are garden plans everywhere you look. However, they may not all be completely accurate or appropriate for our climate and our landscape. We do have a wonderful publication through University of Idaho Extension called Planning an Idaho Vegetable Garden, and it includes a few different plans, very simple plans for a vegetable garden. And that book is free online. You can download and look at those plans. So imagine if this is about all the space that you have to grow vegetables at home. You can get a surprising amount of food out of a box this size. This is maybe 4 by 8, 4 by 10. I don't have my measuring tape with me. But you could get easily probably 4 tomato plants in here. You could get a dozen or so broccoli or kale plants, probably about 4 cucumber or squash plants, or a combination of all of those things. And the trick would be to really plant intensively, planting things at regular spacing so that they really can grow and fill and you don't have any wasted space in the box. So here at the Idaho Botanical Garden, in their vegetable area, we've got a lot of different examples of how we can create edible beds. Here's a more elaborate version of the raised bed. This one is higher, it's more accessible, and it also has the capacity to be turned into a mini greenhouse, which can be great for getting a jump on early spring. So even in very small spaces where you might only have room for a container like this repurposed horse watering trough, you could grow all the salad greens that you need for the spring in this container. Here's an even smaller garden here in a half barrel, a whiskey barrel, and you can see it's already fully planted with spring greens and they're doing really well. Surprisingly, a lot of our salad greens fare best in cooler weather, and the kind of spring that we're having so far, you can see these greens are already well on their way to growing. And so the best indicator of whether it is spring or not is actually not the air temperature, but the soil temperature. So it may seem a little bit funny, but I teach people how to take their soil's temperature. Now I'm just using a meat thermometer. It has a dial that goes from 0 to 220. We're just going to put it about an inch or so into the soil, because that's where our plant seeds and our plant roots are going to be growing right now. And it's about 59 degrees air temperature. However, the soil temperature up here is 65 degrees. The soil temperature gradually raises much more consistently and slowly than air temperature. So really it's a better indicator as to whether spring has arrived or not. And if we think about what that 65 means, it means that it's time to get planting for a lot of our cool season crops, which can germinate at anywhere from 35 to 45 or 50 degrees. So I'm talking about things like beets, cabbages, carrots, cauliflowers, Swiss chard. Any of the cool season greens can be planted now, and pretty reliably they're going to germinate. So another great way to add food production into any size garden is by doing edible landscaping. And this doesn't mean converting your whole front yard into a garden, even though there's plenty of people that do that and it can look really beautiful. But really more about thinking about some of your plant choices and making sure that edible plants make an appearance, both in your trees and shrubs and your perennial plants. So not only are they beautiful, like this espaliered apple here at the Idaho Botanical Garden, or the grape arbor that we're going to look at in a minute, but things like the perennial herbs, and we'll show some sage and some lavender that are here year-round looking beautiful, and yet are also producing food products. So this is about the time of year when you start seeing rhubarb emerge from the ground. It's really interesting looking. You see these red horns, which then to these giant green leaves. So rhubarb is really an ornamental plant, and it's a perennial. It'll come back year after year, and something that you could think about adding to really any sort of permanent border. So while this time of year you might think that not much is happening in the garden and it's a rather bleak and blank landscape, in actuality all kinds of things are starting to grow and come back to life. It's also a great opportunity to come places like the botanical garden or to take walks in your neighborhood and look at the bones of a garden, look at the structures, think about the changes that you might want to make in your own garden, and just be inspired and take advantage of this window of time where you can do your planning before the hard work begins.